Hi guys. A couple of weeks ago, I started a case study for AI content generation, and I saw a lot of different opinions on this. So, on one far extreme, we have these huge black hat automatically generating sites that are pumping out thousands of articles a day, and they're kind of popping up around the place just now. And on the other extreme, we have people who say they'll never publish this kind of content because the search engines will crack down on it and they don't want to be hit by an algorithm update. And in the middle, you have people who are doing, like I'm testing it, using it with manual writing to try and produce good quality content easier. Now, I've actually spoken to people from both extremes. Some people who are running it to this crazy, ridiculous level, and others who will say they'll never, ever touch it. I don't necessarily agree with either extreme, but I understand the logic of both. And for the people who say they'll not publish this type of content, I said this weeks ago, and other people have said the same. If you're outsourcing content right now and you're worried about getting AI generated stuff back, you really have to be paying attention to what you're getting. So the idea of VAs or freelancers using tools to produce content isn't new. We've had people using spinners and things like Quillbot for forever, for years certainly. Some of the earliest writers I hired a long, long time ago, they took content from big publications and just spun it and handed it in to hopefully see I wouldn't notice, I guess. And on this, before we go any further, you should not be using things like Copyscape or Grammarly to check that A, your content is unique or good quality. These are not the same systems as search engines like Google can use, and it really, really should not be your barrier for publishing content there. These tools you don't have to really change content an awful lot to pass Copyscape, right? And that's not enough for Google to think this is good quality content. So can we stop using that as a barrier, please? The market we have just now for content, we do incentivize word count. So we either pay by word, or most of us pay a certain amount for a certain article length. And we kind of say, 1,500 words, 2,000 words, whatever it is. And this, of course, does incentivize writers to have this, the kind of content we see on websites a lot, especially like thinner affiliate sites, where it's just word salad and we're producing like 50 words where 10 will do. Now, this is a hard thing to deal with, and unless you're just paying someone full time, I don't see an easy way of getting around that. Without having a relationship with the writer or literally looking over their shoulder as they're writing, it's kind of hard to know what they're doing or where they're getting the content from. Now, a couple of weeks ago when I started posting this and I had people saying, oh, this is awful and I'll never publish this, somebody else pointed out that if you go into freelance groups on Facebook, you will see screenshots and metrics from AI tools like Jasper or Jarvis, and writers saying, look, I've generated 100,000 words this week and stuff like this. It's not uncommon, but it went a bit more than that. It's not the occasional freelancer who's doing it. So I've been using some of these tools for a couple of sites recently just to see how well they do. And the way we use the tools is we are manually producing the content and guiding the tools. You cannot let AI write your content just now. I'm going to say this, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. It's not going to replace your job, at least no time soon. I used an example recently where I've seen AI content threaten a reader. I think it was last week, I saw one give some ridiculous financial advice. It was something like, your money is safe if you invest everything in a radish farm. It wasn't a radish farm, but it was something like equally as weird. And AI can speak in so much certainty about complete nonsense that it's kind of frightening. Don't let it publish by itself, not if you value your site, because it's going to come up with nonsense. However, if you're steering it, if you're fact checking it, if you're using it, the best way I think you can describe it is using it to prevent writer's block. So you give a content guideline, you know roughly what you want to talk about. If you finish a sentence and you're not sure what you're going to say next, let the AI kick in. Sometimes it will actually write great stuff. You're like, oh, of course, that's a great thing to talk about. Sometimes it'll talk about some nonsense, but it will kind of help you figure out what you want to say next. And sometimes it'll produce junk and you'll delete it all and go again. But there's definitely a process that needs to be kind of learned and refined there. But anyway, my point was, if you work with these tools a lot, and especially if you're focusing within a niche, so we did, I think, like 300 articles on a specific niche recently, you start to see similar patterns, sometimes similar sentences pop up. And we outsourced some content to, I don't want to name names, but it was a well-known content agency. If you watch SEO stuff on YouTube, you've probably heard about the agency. And we had a writer from one of these agencies turn in some work, and we saw this consistent sentence pop up, and we knew exactly where it was coming from. So if you're outsourcing to an agency, not necessarily every agency or every writer, but it still doesn't mean you're not getting this kind of content. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. I reached out to, let me just get the numbers here. I don't script my videos or anything. It'll probably be better if I did, but let me just double check. Yeah. So I reached out to 300 and, I reached out to a lot of freelancers. We had 310 responses, and of that, 130 of them told me that they have experience with AI content generation recently. This was specifically tools like Jasper, Jarvis, Quillbot, all this. We're not counting tools like Freelance or Surfer SEO, because while they're technically somewhat AI tools, we did differentiate between them. Now, if my math is right, that is 41.9% of the writers I spoke to who use these tools, and that's quite a lot. It is, I'll be honest, it's more than I was expecting, but I do think that number is going to grow. Now, if you're ever talking to freelance writers, if you've done this before, you probably had the same assumption that I did, which is a chunk of those responses, it's going to be writers saying, oh yeah, I know how to work that tool, because they're just hoping to get some extra work out of it. That's possibly true. Maybe a small percentage of it is true, but we did follow up with quite a lot of them, and some of them were able to talk about the tool quite a bit. One of them actually was responsible for creating training videos for other VAs at one of their last jobs, and they showed me one of the videos. And even if that is true, my assumption is actually a certain percentage of those responses, they do use the tools, but didn't want to admit to it because they know some SEOs will have a stigma around it and don't want the content, but they still want to use it themselves. So my guess is that number is going to be pretty accurate, and I think it's going to grow. Now, whether you think this is a problem, Pandora's box is open. There's no putting these tools away now. So it's not entirely new. So as I said before, you have things like Quillbot and Spinners that they've been using forever. Writers who are going to lie about where they're getting this content from are just going to continue to do so. And now they have a better tool to do it. Right? So if you say, I want this content to be 100% manually done, it's still going to be kind of hard to know. Now, if they're just hitting compose, and they're generating nonsense content, then you should be picking this up anyway. So when I say you shouldn't let an AI tool just publish your content, you shouldn't let a writer that you don't trust just randomly publish content anyway, because either way, you're going to get hit by an algorithm at some point there. So I think that number is going to grow. I think a lot of writers out there are using it, whether they're going to admit to it or not. And I don't necessarily think this is a bad idea. So I think I've said this in every video where we've talked about AI content so far. You can't just let it do its own thing. It's not coming for your job. It's not going to replace a good writer anytime soon. But as a tool to improve what a writer can do, so a good writer is still going to produce better content with SEO than a bad writer is. And if you have the quality controls in place, whether it's yourself or an editor or whatever your process is, you're going to spot this. So Personally, I don't mind that the agency returned AI content to me because it was still entirely unique. It wasn't plagiarized. Everything was fact checked. I do, especially when I don't know the writer, I check a lot of this content, especially for my bigger sites. I go through it with a fine tooth comb. So all the facts were correct. Nothing was plagiarized. There was clearly a human steering the tool. It wasn't just pumping out gibberish and recommending people should invest in a radish farm. I don't have an issue with writers using it as long as I want them to be honest about using it. So if you're a freelance writer, for the love of God, just tell us you're using the tool. That's fine. Don't let it generate everything, but using it as a tool can produce better content. So if you're letting it produce 90% of your content, then there's a very good chance you're going to have these consistent patterns in there. Probably not a good plan, but at the end of the day, if your content is good, if it's not lying, so don't let it come up with facts, because it will speak in crazy certainty about complete nonsense. But fact check it, give it some tone, steer it, keep it on topic, and add your own research and stuff to it, and you're producing better quality content in a shorter amount of time. So yeah, I don't think this will surprise most people. I think the number is higher than some might be expecting, but I think it's only going to go up from here, especially the more we see these tools. I know there's an argument that search engines can detect content from things like OpenAI and GPT, but if you're just letting it churn out stuff, yes, I think absolutely there's obvious patterns there that search engines like Google can eventually pick up on. But I think I think the best example is if you're getting a writer to write about something, right? I'm going to take a site I recently saw, skateboarding. Now, I've not really skateboarded. I don't know anything about skateboarding. If for whatever reason I am writing a website on skateboarding, I'm researching, I'm pulling up the top 5 results on Google, I'm reading their article, and I'm summarizing, I'm rewriting, I'm taking my understanding of the topic. When you're hiring a freelance writer to write about the 10 best blue widgets, this writer's probably not sitting there with the widgets in front of them. They are doing the exact same thing. They are Googling, they are getting an understanding of the topic, and they are putting it in their own words. Now, yes, there is absolutely something to be said for hiring a writer who understands the topic. If you are writing a site on skateboarding, if you can get a professional skateboarder to write your content, fantastic. But I still think that professional skateboarder using an AI tool could produce good quality content in less time. So they'll write what they know, they get to the stumbling block, they have writer's block, that little line is flashing on the screen, they don't know what to say next. They hit compose, and again, it might produce something useful, it might produce nonsense, but it'll get them writing again. So yeah, that's just sort of it. Wanted to share. A lot of these writers are using these tools anyway. If you think this is a problem, it's something to watch out for. You have to really be paying attention. It does help if you use the tool yourself a wee bit, at least I think, so you can kind of spot these patterns. You kind of get an idea of the content that you are looking for. Personally, I'm not bothered about it. I want my writers to be honest about it, tell me they're using the tools, as long as they're steering it properly and they're correcting it and using it properly. I don't think it's a problem. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I will have an update on the AI case study. I think I might have mentioned we're working on a site that has some weirdly specific content. So it's taking, I think, about 45 to 50 minutes to produce 1,200 to 1,500 words on this niche, which is a bit longer than some of the other ones, but it's producing some really good content. It just takes, sometimes it takes more editing and fact checking, just depends on the niche. And it would take a lot longer than that if we were just doing an article without that. But I'll have an update for that soon. It is SEO, so the results are slow, but overall everything is going along. The lines are all going the direction we want them to go. So everything is slowly growing, but we'll have an update when something interesting happens. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.